Hello, everybody, and welcome to this special episode of our podcast. I'm Chris.
And I'm James.
And we're the Formula One Bros.
Just two twins with the love of F1 to share everything in the world of Formula One.
And this week, we're going to be covering the last part of the car launches, covering Alpine and Alfa Romeo, updating you on all of the news from around Formula One, and talking about the first test of two, which are happening in preseason testing for Formula One. And we're in the same room.
Yeah, we're together. First episode, we're together. This is cool.
We're not in little boxes on our computer screens.
We can actually interact, and
we're sitting here drinking coffee together.
Also, before we begin, there are two cats that are around. So if you see like a cat come across the screen or behind us, or just stick a head in the middle of the screen,
or if you hear WrestleMania in the background.
Yeah. So
let's get going.
Let's dive right into it.
Yeah. So the first thing that we want to talk about is just all of the F1 news from around the sport. So the first biggest thing that we have to talk about, and this is going to be a little bit in conjunction with some other news. There are a lot of news cycles that are happening all at the same time. But I want to first cover everything that's happening with Haas, the Haas F1 team.
Yeah.
So with everything that has been happening with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Haas during preseason testing removed all Uralkali branding from the team. Uralkali is the current title sponsor of the Haas Formula One team, and it is a Russian company who and their driver, Nikita Mazepin, his father, Dmitry Mazepin, is the CEO of the company. And the team is providing a lot of backing to the company is providing a lot of backing to the team. And that backing also comes with a seat on the team for Nikita Mazepin. And so there's no beating around the bush. Nikita Mazepin is a pay driver. He is there because of the Uralkali sponsorship.
Yeah.
And this is important for several reasons. The first being with all of the European and U.S. sanctions that have been placed on Russia, on the Kremlin, and everything as a result of that, Uralkali's future with the team has been called into question, and their ability to fund the team has been called into question. We don't know specifics. Everything is being handled in court. But we do understand that team principal Günther Steiner is in court to review and to kind of go over Uralkali's association with the team.
And it's also tricky, too, because, I mean, Uralkali is a Russian sponsor and a Russian company. Haas is an American team. Mm-hmm. So that's where a lot of the muddy waters are coming from, too.
So not only is it from part of purely from a funding standpoint, and can Uralkali actually pay Haas the funding that it needs? Mm-hmm. But, there's the question of association, and to avoid getting political here, there's a lot of history between the United States and Russia. So the association was rocky at best when it was first announced in 2021.
Yeah, at best.
But that is only, they have a minority stake in the team, and it only provides a fifth of the funding.
I thought it was a majority.
Yep. A lot of the other funding comes from some of Mick Schumacher's sponsors being 1&1, which I guess the German would be 1&1.
Yeah.
And Under Armour, which also sponsors Mick Schumacher, and Gene Haas, who funds the team. And this also calls into question the membership of the team for their driver, Nikita Mazepin, for a couple reasons. One, Uralkali's, Nikita Mazepin's spot comes with funding from Uralkali.
And that's essentially what a pay driver, Chris mentioned earlier what a pay driver is. And a pay driver, for those who don't know, a pay driver is essentially the team's sponsor, or the drivers all come with sponsorship. Mm-hmm. And when a team signs with a sponsor, they have some sort of influence on the team. In some cases, the condition of sponsorship, in this case, Uralkali with Haas, is that their driver, Nikita Mazepin, has a seat in one of the Formula One cars.
Mm-hmm.
That's what a pay driver is.
Yep.
He's basically just being paid to be in that seat.
Yeah. So Nikita, the questions surrounding Nikita Mazepin's future with the Haas F1 team is twofold. One, the Uralkali Association, and two, we don't know if he's going to be able to get visas to any of the Grand Prix. As of right now, a lot of Russian visas have been frozen.
Mm-hmm.
Currently, he can. There's only like 3 countries. It's the United Arab Emirates, Brazil, and Azerbaijan that are currently still allowing Russian visas. So we don't even know if Nikita Mazepin will be able to travel to the first race in Bahrain.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of question marks surrounding, and this is all, I mean, this is, really the past couple of years for Haas have been tough.
Mm-hmm.
This with all of the, Uralkali was really brought on to help them weather the financial turmoil through the pandemic. That after everything that is, gone through with the Rich Energy deal in 2019, they just, Haas is having a really hard time finding some peace right now.
Yeah.
So
it seems like they just keep taking blow after blow after blow.
But Gunther Steiner says that, at least in the short to medium term, that Haas's future on the grid will not be affected. They still are going to be able to operate at close to the budget cap this year, and they still plan to compete for the entire season. If Nikita Mazepin does not end up competing, they've named a couple drivers that are likely to take over that seat. Chief among them, their reserve driver, Pietro Fittipaldi, who has raced in Formula One before. He has a super license, and he stood in for the team at the Sakir Grand Prix.
When Roman Grosjean had his crash.
After Roman Grosjean had his crash, and at the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix in 2020.
So he does have F1 experience.
He has F1 experience. He's quick. We know he's quick. The Fittipaldi brothers have been, done well for themselves in feeder series. They've made a name for themselves in IndyCar as well. So Haas is in good hands. The future in the sport is right now is not in question. But this leads to the next major talking point, which
yes. So
Mario Andretti announced a week ago that Michael wants to join Formula One.
Yeah. So the Andretti team and name, they currently are just in IndyCar, but they're really pushing to field a Formula One team, and apparently, courtesy of Will Buxton, posted on Twitter that apparently the Andretti team would be able to pay the entry fee and have enough funding and backing to be able to field a team that could be in the top 3 right off the bat, and and be able to spend up to the budget cap. And they're already looking to make a deal with Renault to power their cars. So they already are looking at an engine supplier. So it's looking very possible that Andretti could field a team in Formula One. Now, the trick with that is, though, I know the FIA and Formula One are not really looking to expand the grid. So Andretti, they could have all the funding, all the money, backing, engine, power unit lineup, everything. But if the FIA don't allow the field expansion, there's nothing that they can do. Which, in my opinion, that's kind of silly, because, you would want more. In my opinion, if I were the FIA, I'd be like, let's get as many teams as possible in the sport, have more drivers. We have an opportunity to get more talented drivers in, because right now we're kind of stuck in this loop of, a lot of drivers. There are only a handful of drivers that don't have multi-year contracts. And a lot of talented drivers are coming up from F2, and are no longer racing in F2, and are kind of just stuck as either development drivers or have to go to parallel series to race instead of coming to F1. So in my opinion, I think it would be silly for the FIA to not allow Andretti to field a team, but who knows?
Yeah. So the reason why we talk about that in the same kind of breath as Haas is because Gene Haas is American. He has a very successful NASCAR team in the form of Stewart Haas Racing. And, they're race winners. Their driver lineup is incredible, being led by Kevin Harvick. The reason why we talk about that is because Andretti fielding a works team is kind of out of the question going through the regular FIA channels. We also do know that Michael Andretti, son of Mario Andretti, former F1 world champion, Indy 500 winner, and Daytona 500 winner, has approached Gene Haas in Michael's terms 1 million times about purchasing the Formula One team, about Gene Haas selling the company to Michael. This is a part of Michael's larger ambitions to form a, quote, Andretti Global. They already have an Indy Lights team, an IndyCar team, Formula E team. So to branch out into Formula One and to other ventures like possibly rallying, World Endurance Championship, Extreme E, all those kind of things, is all a part of Michael's plan. So the reason why we talk about this now is Gene, the reason why we're, questioning Gene Haas's involvement in the team is because he has not been willing in the past to up his portion of stake in the team. And he's not been willing to put more money into the team. So would this, trouble with Uralkali and the Russian situation prompt Gene Haas to sell? Michael has said that he would be willing to purchase. Yeah. And at a very, very, very healthy price.
Yeah. And we've seen, if you have watched Drive to Survive or have been keeping up with Formula One on social media, Gene, it's very clear that if Haas doesn't get back to the success that they were having, their best season was 2018. I believe they finished fifth,
just behind Renault.
Yeah, right behind Renault. If they don't get back to that success of being a very strong midfield competitor, I personally don't see Gene sticking around for more than 2 years.
Yeah, who knows? But yeah, so last two things with the Andretti thing. They've already reached a verbal agreement with Renault to supply the team with power units, which currently Alpine is the only team that uses Renault engines. So
right now, Haas uses Ferrari engines.
Haas uses Ferrari engines. Yeah, and then the other thing is Andretti has confirmed that their driver Colton Herta, who is the only Andretti driver aside from Roman Grosjean, who has a super license, Colton Herta will be the number one driver should that opportunity arise. So definitely interesting to keep up with, but it's definitely going to be a long-term news story that we're going to be covering over several years. Andretti is apparently targeting 2024 as the time frame in which he wants to field the team.
Which, if Gene Haas were to sell, I think that would be the year to do it.
Yep.
If he were to sell, if they are not able to climb back.
Yep. Last news thing. Sporting regulations. The 2022 sporting regulations were released.
That's all this guy. He's going to do the tech talk.
I went through it's a 118-page document. I went through it. A lot of it is mumbo jumbo that doesn't really affect the way that Grand Prix weekend goes, operates. A lot of it is, a lot of changes or anything is kind of done through like the way that teams operate. But I do want to pick out a couple highlights and talk about those. First one being, and I think the most interesting one is the Q2 tire rule completely scrapped. So when you go through the document, it's like any time that you update a legal document, anything that you take out, it's in strike through, and anything that is added is highlighted in a different color.
Yep.
I liked looking at the document because the additions were highlighted in pink. catches the eye when you're scrolling through a 118-page document.
It does.
But the entire Q2 rule was completely scrapped so essentially what it used to be is any team that got to the third round of qualifying, which is the top 10 shootout for pole, had to start the Grand Prix on the tire that they set the fastest lap time in Q2, which I think I always thought was a really clunky rule.
Yeah, it's a little weird.
And the reason why I think it's clunky is I'll use the example of Pierre Gasly. Pierre Gasly put in monster qualifying efforts last year, and he put that car in a position where it did not belong, but he did that because everybody else in Q2 would put their fastest times in on the mediums, the slower tires, and he would just rocket to the front of the field like P3, P4 on soft tires. And then he'd have to start the race on soft tires when everybody around him was on medium tires. And so his race was immediately compromised from the get-go. So I always thought it was a clunky rule. So essentially what that means is every driver, no matter if they're in the top 10 or not, has free choice of tire at the start of a Grand Prix.
Which, I mean, you look at a lot of other motorsport series, especially here in America, like IndyCar and NASCAR, that you start on fresh tires no matter what. No matter what you happen in qualifying, everyone starts the race on fresh tires.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
that rule always seemed a little odd to me.
And even in NASCAR, where they only have one tire compound, you have the choice to start on sticker or scrubbed tires, depending on how, like with strategy, how you want to set up the stints over a 500-mile race. So, and in an IndyCar, I mean, with ovals, it's the same thing, but with road courses, you have the prime and the option tires. You can start on whatever tire you want. So I think it's going to be a welcome addition to the sport.
It would be nice. It'll make the tire rules less confusing.
And I think it'll make strategy much more optimal, especially for, people like Pierre Gasly that are out qualifying their car.
Yeah.
And they're putting themselves in a position where or George Russell, or on the occasional time a Williams pops up into the Q3, their race isn't compromised from the very beginning.
Yeah.
The next thing, which is just kind of a little procedural thing, is the number of races in a Grand Prix weekend were up to, I think it was 24, 25. So we're having a 23 Grand Prix season, and they upped it from 23 to 24, I believe it was, if I'm remembering it correctly. And that's just to allow, F1 over the past couple of years, especially in the Liberty Media era, has been increasing the number of races, increasing the number of countries that they're going to, which as a fan perspective is always great news. Yeah, and I have a feeling that they're
cool,
and especially with Guangyu Zhou on the grid, they're talking about a second race in China once Shanghai comes back.
Yeah.
And they're talking about a third race in the US in Vegas. So they're obviously continuing to expand the championship.
Yeah.
We're racing in new countries now. Like, we just raced in Qatar. We're going, Imola seems now to be a permanent fixture back on the grid,
which is an awesome track.
Saudi Arabia, we're now racing in. So they're always expanding, but I feel for the crews.
Yeah. It can be very, very tough, especially when you have like triple headers, what we call in Formula One, we call triple headers, meaning you have like 3 weekends in a row that they're racing. And it's like, after the race is over on Sunday, immediately you start breaking everything down, packing up. And by Tuesday, they're in the next country, setting everything up, getting everything ready.
Yeah.
And then Thursday's media day, Friday practice, Saturday practice and qualifying, Sunday race, and then immediately do that same thing over again. And you do that 3 weeks in a row. It's exhausting.
Yeah.
And not even to point out like the jet lag from the time differences, just how exhausting just traveling can be. Because if you're like a normal person like us, like traveling to different countries, it can be tiring.
Yeah.
And then you put being a crew member or a driver or anyone involved with Formula One, it's exhausting. It's exhausting. So that's going to be tough.
And just to put it in perspective, like I think we as Americans have a very unique perspective because NASCAR, with the exception of Easter, races every weekend,
every Sunday.
Yeah. But they can do that. Formula One can do that in Europe. But when you have a triple header that's like Azerbaijan, Canada, France, that would be like, NASCAR going from, Daytona to if they had a race in Hawaii, in the span of 1 week. And, I know they're racing in California, but they were just coming from Daytona. And then they're going to Phoenix after that. So they're not really, NASCAR does a very good job of setting it up so that they, do it in a very logical way. And Formula One tries to do that, but just there's so much, and especially compared to NASCAR, there is so much more involved in everything. Like the tracks don't provide the facilities. Like all of these big team areas are all brought by and built and torn down every weekend by the team. So it's a lot more. It would be like the NASCAR teams tearing down the entire infield of the Daytona International Speedway and going all the way to California and having to set it back up.
Because at these NASCAR tracks, like the infield, the pit, the
garages,
lane, the garages, everything that is permanent. That's permanent. And that's one thing that's different about Formula One, because we grew up on seeing both sides, but like in NASCAR, like all that stuff is permanent. In Formula One, everything is moved. And the tracks, when they're not being raced at, it's just literally pavement and empty grandstands.
Yep. And there's a lot less technology involved in NASCAR. The next couple things is every team will have to field 2 drivers that are not regularly on that are not their full-time drivers in FP1 sessions. So 2 times every team now is required to give up one of their car, or each car one time, to another driver contracted by the team to race in an FP1 session.
Is that every weekend?
No, it's so for example, I'll give you an example. So say you are Ferrari. Ferrari's reserve drivers are Mick Schumacher, Antonio Giovinazzi, and Robert Schwartzman, I believe.
Yep.
So we are Ferrari. We're going through a season. We have 2 cars, one for Charles and one for Carlos. One time during a season, Charles's car is required to be relinquished for FP1.
So it's only once a season.
And another, once for each
driver,
car.
For each car.
So it's twice throughout a season. Each car, each team will have to relinquish each car one time to another driver, which it was never been really a regulation in the past. We've seen it with some teams with development drivers.
A lot of teams would do that, especially like towards the end of the season.
Right. And
like Williams did that a couple times.
Williams has done it with Roy Nissany.
Yeah, Roy Nissany.
Alfa Romeo does that occasionally with Robert Kubica.
And Mick Schumacher did an FP1 in Alfa Romeo before he was at Haas.
Yep, he's done one with Alfa Romeo and with Haas.
Yep.
Pietro Fittipaldi has done one with Haas. But now every team is going to relinquish their car, each of their cars once a season.
Which I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah. It gives more people the caveat though is you have to find drivers with super license. You have to have at least, and it's not a full-time super license. It just has to have a free practice super license, which requires fewer points. Which, if you don't know, there's a point system in order to get a super license. You have to have 40 points. Your standing in different championships awards you a different amount of points.
I just realized with that, we could finally see everyone's favorite Jamie Chadwick in an F1 car during practice.
She's a 2-time champion of
the W Series.
The W Series. So she has a free practice super. I believe she has a free practice super license. She doesn't have a full super license. But I believe she has a free practice super license. Love to see Jamie Chadwick. Also, just because she deserves a seat. She's a 2-time champion. At least in the feeder series, she deserves a seat. And we hope at the podcast here that we can finally see another woman driver in Formula One during our lifetime.
Yeah.
because there have been a couple that have even scored points, but none that have ever raced full time.
Yep.
So that would be really nice. But yeah, so those are the main takeaways, at least my main takeaways from the sporting regulations. Again, a lot of little procedural things that have been changed. Just as we're increasing the number of races, things like power units, components that are available throughout a season.
Yeah.
But those are all the main news stories. And we'll circle back to some other teams later in the segment. But it is time to move on to
two other teams now. So last episode, we did a portion of the episode where we looked at like a bunch of the liveries that have been launched, the car launches. There were two teams that we did not cover because they hadn't launched their cars, and now they have. So the first team that we're going to take a look at, they launched their car first. And it's interesting because when they launched their car, they actually launched two liveries. So we have the Alpine team. They have launched two new liveries. The biggest differences with this, first off, they look awesome.
Yeah.
They look awesome. They look really cool.
I mean, and maybe this is just because BWT, their new title sponsor, is now their color combination is pink and blue.
Yeah.
But that Alpine electric blue with the BW pink,
it looks really good.
Looks gorgeous.
It looks way better than the Aston Martin green and pink, where the car looks a little bit like a watermelon. But the blue and pink together looks really cool.
It's a pretty color combo.
Now, obviously, there are two of them.
Yes.
There are two of them. One primarily blue, one primarily pink. The one in the bottom, the pink one, will be run at the first two races, first being in Bahrain and then Saudi Arabia. And then they're going to run the primarily blue one for the rest of the season. Now, I got to ask, are you team pink or are you team blue?
Okay, so I've thought about this, and because I did love the pink Racing Point.
Yeah, the pink Racing Points.
I think the sponsorship, just the way that they have the sponsorship set up on the Alpine looks a lot better compared to the Racing Point always looked a little blocky. But so my first initial thought was pink, just because I miss seeing a pink car on the grid.
Yeah.
But that electric blue is just so pretty.
It looks really cool.
And after seeing the cars in testing and seeing, images and everything, it just looks so cool. Like in the sunlight.
Oh, that electric blue just sparkles in the sunlight.
Yeah.
I'm definitely team blue in this one. Now, don't get me wrong. Both of them look great, but I like the blue better.
Just to be different, I'm going to say pink then.
Say pink.
Because I like.
You are wearing a pink shirt.
Yes, I am. I like both. And I'm really excited to see the pink livery in Bahrain and in Saudi Arabia.
Yep.
A couple other, I just want to kind of talk about a little packaging things. So looking at the side pods, very neat and tidy packaging. The Coke bottle section and the engine cover look very good. They have some cooling louvers on the side pods, which has been a trend for teams with bigger side pods. Especially compared to the airbox and the 2021 Alpine, which was just big and bulbous and looked really top heavy. That looks like a much neater package. And I think that's why they have the cooling louvers on the side pods, to kind of reduce some of that packaging and the cooling from last year.
Yeah.
And we'll get on to Alpine. I just want and preseason testing, but Alpine CEO Laurent Rossi has
Cat.
This is Enzo, named after Enzo Ferrari. He's my buddy, and he's just going to lay right here. CEO Laurent Rossi has kind of said that they're targeting 100 race goal to be back up towards the front and competing for race wins. They said that they are looking at only 5th place this year. They're targeting 5th place, which kind of seems strange considering when, the team first came back into F1 as Renault in 2016.
I'm very happy right now.
I'm so distracted. You're clearly the favorite.
Hey, bud.
When Alpine came back as Renault in 2016, they had a 5-year goal to the championship. That 5-year goal is up. So a little muted launch from the team, and they kind of seem a little lost right now. So it'll be interesting to see, and we will get onto Alpine a little bit more in preseason testing.
All right, I gotta ask Enzo. Can you hand me the mic? Okay, Enzo, what do you think? Team blue or team pink? Team pink. Good answer.
I agree.
All right.
So that's Alpine. Looks great. Let's move on.
You're gonna have to click the button. I've got a cat in my lap.
So up next.
So hit stop. The next one that we'll take a look at was just released this morning. Yep. Was just released this morning, and that is the Alfa Romeo team. And oh man,
that looks great.
This looks cool.
It's so different from their liveries of the past. That it's just so strikingly different.
Yeah.
At first I was like, ooh, that's a little like boxy and clunky, but the more that I look at it, that's pretty.
It's very pretty. And the biggest difference between this one and some of the other teams, the wheel covers.
Yeah, the wheel
all
covers.
of the other teams have run like very plain, like single color, like either black or like a light gray wheel cover. This is it's different. It's got like both red and white in it, and it looks so cool.
Yeah, it looks good. It also gets marks for me because the numbers on the side of the car, the driver numbers, are actually like legible.
Yeah,
which some of the teams, McLaren, they're not so.
Not so legible.
And I think it's just the white pops on the red.
Mm-hmm.
The red is that's just a pretty red. So
it's very pretty.
Yeah.
It looks great. This gets a 10 out of 10 for me. Absolutely 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
It looks good. It's right up there for me with how beautiful Ferrari looks, how beautiful Aston Martin looks, Mercedes.
Mm-hmm.
It's beautiful.
They had a really cool like grayscale camo testing livery, which Alpine has done, Alfa Romeo has done in the past, where they have these testing liveries. And to not reveal their full car, and it was camo this year, so it's great. Couple things technically, they have a really dramatic undercut underneath the side pods, so it's essentially the gap between the floor and the side pods, to kind of create almost a double diffuser effect to generate more downforce,
which we've seen a couple teams do that.
We've seen a couple teams do that. Aston Martin, Red Bull.
Red Bull's is probably the most dramatic.
Yes, Red Bull. I would say so. So it looks great, and I'm excited to see. Well, just kind of as we're coming to the end of that, as we're coming to the end of that, I have to say, now that we've seen all of the cars, I think this is going to be the best looking Formula One grid in a very long time.
Yep.
All of the cars look stunning.
Yeah.
And maybe this is just the fact that we have dramatically new cars.
Yeah.
But these teams have nailed it. Even the liveries that I'm not, even the liveries that I'm like not a big fan of,
they still look really good. They still
look great.
Like I'm not the biggest fan of McLaren, but now I will say with them last week, I wasn't a big fan of McLaren or AlphaTauri, but now seeing them on track, they still look really good. All of the teams, all of the liveries look really, really good. Last year, there were a couple that I was like, I don't know about that. But this year, they look really stunning.
And
they look good.
We've finally been able to see them all on track in winter testing. So let's get right into that.
Speaking of winter testing. So, winter testing is concluded. Well, there are 2 sessions. The way that they're doing winter testing this year, there are 2 sessions of winter testing. They just completed the first 3-day in Barcelona, Spain. And right off the bat, I have to say, and you kind of mentioned it. Oh, bye. The cars on the track look so
they look
good.
great.
They look awesome. And the differences between how the cars look, like with the noses, the side pods, the biggest one, the side pods, it looks really, really cool. None of the cars really look clunky, and they all look good.
I mean, from the F1 community and team personnel included, I think everybody was worried at the beginning of the season that the cars would look too much the same, that it would resemble a spec series similar to,
and that was my opinion,
Formula 2
at the
or
beginning.
IndyCar.
I was worried that it would look too much like a spec series.
Yeah. So, and even like team principals have been surprised with how varied the cars look. And I think this is going to create a great season. And I mentioned it last podcast that there will naturally over time, over this season and over several years, there will be a convergence of one philosophy.
Yeah.
Or a set of several philosophies that look
great.
I
mean, because you look at, like, for example, 2014, when the 2014 regulations, where we went away from the V8 engines in 2013 to the V6 turbo hybrid, whole regulation changed a lot like the one that we saw this year. All the cars look strikingly different in their philosophy and how they design the car. And then gradually over time until 2016, 2017, they all kind of started converging and looking the same. So I think you're absolutely right. I think that will happen.
Yep.
Now,
well, before we get started on the next thing, I just want to say, so this testing was actually not televised.
No, it was not.
The Bahrain test
will be
in a couple of weeks. Will be.
Yeah, it's two weeks, I think.
Something like that. I can't remember the dates off the top of my head, but yeah. Word of testing.
The word of testing. There's a big hot topic all throughout testing. The word of testing, this is going to sound weird. We're not making this up. Porpoising.
Yep.
You know, like the animals, porpoises, like dolphins, like jumping up and down through the water. Porpoising. We're seeing that happen with some of the cars. Why is that? So what is porpoising? How does that happen?
So porpoising was something that also, so this is the second ground effect era in Formula One. The first one happened in the 70s and it was eventually banned in 82. And the reason why is because essentially you have these, what are called Venturi tunnels on the sides of the car. And it creates a sloped tunnel like this on the floor of the car that makes the airflow under the car speed up as it's compressed. This creates negative pressure, which generates negative lift that sucks the car to the ground. So it's more reliant on underbody aerodynamics than overbody dynamics to produce cornering speeds.
Yeah. So rather than the air being pushing the car down to create downforce, it's sucking the car to the track to create downforce.
And porpoising was a problem that happened in the first ground effect era in the 70s. But essentially, so what it looks like is it's just the car is bouncing up and down as it goes down the track. And it just looks like the car is running over like a lot of very dramatic bumps.
Yeah.
But essentially what is happening is at high speeds, the car is being sucked to the ground so much so that the airflow is actually stalling underneath the car. And so the airflow is not getting to the back of the car. So because the airflow underneath the car stalls, it lifts up off the ground. And when it lifts up, the airflow re-engages and sucks the car back to the ground, and the process is repeated. So the car is literally bouncing as it goes down.
Yeah.
And this is something that you can't test on the simulator. That the teams knew that this was a possibility. Nowhere near to the level that has happened. Like several teams had broken floors, damaged floors in testing.
Like Red Bull had to bring in a whole new floor.
Mercedes had to bring in a whole new floor. McLaren brought in a new floor. Ferrari was testing different configurations of its floor. Everything. And they're just literally trying to solve this problem.
Yeah. And McLaren seems to have been the only one to solve the issue. But the problem is how they solve the issue is it does not necessarily fit the regulation of the car.
Well,
so how they did it, they took the sides, and I saw this on Twitter this morning. They took the very sides of the floor and made them flexible to kind of bend them down because we saw that with the Lotus. The Lotus had that cage that basically went to the ground and stopped the car from doing it and doing the porpoising in the 70s. And so McLaren have kind of started to do it, but you're not allowed to have flexible parts on the floor.
Yeah. Well, the other thing too is it also takes away from the performance of the car.
Yeah.
So the key for these teams, and they didn't know what extent it would be because they couldn't do it and they couldn't like test it in simulation or on the wind tunnel.
Yeah.
Because you would damage the belt that the car sits on. So the key now now that the first test is over, between the next test and eventually the Grand Prix weekend in Bahrain, is going to be, how do we solve this problem? Because it doesn't really, what it really affects is obviously it's going to damage the car, and it makes corner entry really tricky, and it makes the car really unstable under braking. So that is going to be the task for all of the teams. All of the teams suffered from this problem, from Mercedes right down to Haas and Alfa Romeo.
Yeah. So speaking of winter testing is very, it's very easy to make season predictions based off of winter testing, which it's tough to do. There are certain things that you look for, and there are certain things that aren't really as important as you might think. So things that you look for to kind of determine where the team's going to shake out for the season. The biggest thing is lap count. Things that we don't necessarily look for are like lap times. So for example, in both 2017 and 2018, Ferrari had the fastest cars in testing, but then 2017, 2018, it was Mercedes that won the title. Now, the reason why we say lap count, lap count is really, really important, because that basically determines how reliable is your car. Because a lot of laps are run over testing. And the reason why lap count is a really, really good indicator of how a team is going to do over the season. Let's look at the last 5 seasons from 2021 all the way back to 2017. In every single one of those cases, the team that had the highest lap count ended up winning the constructors title.
All of which coincidentally were Mercedes.
All of which were Mercedes. 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, and 2021 testing. The team that did the most laps in winter testing, which was Mercedes, ended up winning the constructors title.
Despite 17, 18, and 19, Ferrari had the fastest car over 1 lap.
Yes.
But here's the thing. Here's also why we don't look at lap times, is because we don't know. The teams are often not doing low fuel runs. We don't know the fuel loads on the car
or engine modes.
I don't think any team ran their engines at full capacity this weekend, especially Alpine. But they don't run their engines at full capacity. They run really heavy fuel loads because they're just trying to put laps on the car to see, how the car is handling and to test the correlation between their simulations and what's actually happening on track.
Yeah.
So lap time can be really, really deceiving.
It can be. Now, speaking of lap count, granted, this is only the first session. There's one other session, but the team that ran the most laps, Ferrari.
And it was the only team to make it 400 laps.
Yes.
Above the 400 lap mark.
Yep. So Ferrari has currently run the most laps in testing. And it's funny because, you look at teams that ran in winter testing from 2021 all the way to 2017. I looked at this too. The team that run the second most laps ended up coming second in the championship. So that was cool to see. We are both Ferrari fans here. We try to be as unbiased as possible, but it is really cool to see Ferrari ran the most laps. Granted, there is one more testing session that happens in Bahrain, but yeah. So the last segment for winter testing, last segment that we'll do, who are our biggest winners and who are our biggest losers of winter testing?
Yeah, biggest winners. You have to say Ferrari.
Yeah, Ferrari.
They were Charles Leclerc was fastest on day one. They ran the most lap times. Mattia Binotto has said, and first of all, Charles and Carlos seem in everything, they've looked really confident in the car and the way that it's handling, and they've said that they've just spoken very confidently of the car in some press conferences. They seem really confident. Mattia Binotto seems he's really, really confident. Toto Wolff has said that Ferrari seems like they're a couple months ahead of the curve. The only thing that makes me hesitant is Mattia Binotto shot back and said that come to the first race weekend in Bahrain, they think Mercedes and Red Bull will be a couple months ahead of them. Mercedes and Red Bull will be updating their car, and McLaren will be updating their car ahead of Bahrain, and Ferrari will not.
Yes, but it's a sprint, not a marathon.
And I also will, with Ferrari, Mattia Binotto has said that they've been more than pleased with the correlation of simulation,
which that's been an issue the past couple of years,
and they have exceeded all of their targets for testing. So Williams, I also have to say, is also a big winner because McLaren, because they both ran monster lap counts.
Oh yeah, and look at especially Williams. I mean, if you all don't know, Williams in 2019, when testing was over 6 days. The first 3 days of testing, Williams didn't even have a car.
Nope.
And so they didn't run until day 4 of testing, and they just did 3 days of testing. And now Williams was in the top 3 in lap count.
And they had a really quiet week.
They did have a really quiet week,
which for them is a good sign.
Is good.
Is a very good sign.
There were no concerns. There wasn't any concern like, oh, is Williams going to be a back marker this year? I don't think they will. Based off of how the lap count and how consistent they were in these 3 days in testing, I don't think Williams will be a back marker this year. Yeah. I think they will be able to compete, very strongly in the midfield and maybe even snag a podium or two. And yeah, McLaren was definitely another winner. They ran. Yeah. I think they were second in lap count.
Yeah,
McLaren was second in lap count.
George Russell, Mercedes George Russell, after day 2 of testing, said that he thought that Ferrari and McLaren looked the strongest. Now day 3 came and it was Lewis, George, Max, Sergio. So it was Mercedes and Red Bull top 4.
Yeah.
So again, we're not really going to be able to tell until
bringing balance back
FP1.
To the
FP1 in Bahrain.
Yeah.
Biggest losers.
Biggest losers. I have to say there are the 3. Haas is one of them, Alfa Romeo, and unfortunately Alpine. Haas, they had a lot of reliability issues. Well, in the case, all of them had reliability issues. Alfa Romeo did not. Day 2, they ran the most laps. They did look really promising on lap count in day 2, but day 1 and day 3, they weren't able to really run. And same with Alpine too. They had a host of reliability issues to Fernando Alonso's car catching fire on.
And I'll get to that in a minute. But Valtteri Bottas with Alfa Romeo said that they did not hit their lap count targets. They didn't. It was tough for them to do a whole lot of running. They didn't get all of their programs completed. They will have more time in Bahrain, but you have to say that those 3 teams are definitely on the back foot. And why Alpine is so they had DRS problems all week. So Fernando Alonso never ran with the DRS. Esteban Ocon tested the DRS a couple times, but it was shaky in the way that it worked. So they had DRS problems. And Fernando Alonso ran his engine the entire time on a completely detuned. The one time that they tried to run on a higher engine mode, they had a cooling leak that caught the entire rear of the car on fire.
Yeah. And,
which is really, really concerning for Alpine, that the Alpine power unit is having that reliability problems. And with everything that the CEO, Laurent Rossi, has said, and, they're only targeting 5th. It's going to be another 100 Grand Prix, which is going to be the 2024, 2025 range when they're targeting wins. You have to say Alfa Romeo Alpine is not out of the woods yet.
Yeah. So it's unfortunate to talk about talk about that. But yeah, I would say those three
But
teams.
they still, despite that, they still did have a fair number of laps.
Mm-hmm.
Their lap count was pretty high. Their lap times were just
nowhere.
They weren't able to run on high engine modes the whole time.
But a lot can change from now until between now and the first race.
Yep. Yeah. So just all the problems that Haas is having with all of their sponsorship and everything, it's going to make for a rough year for them. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. There's still a lot that can happen between now and Bahrain. We know that a lot of teams are updating their cars between now and then. So a lot to look forward to. And it is still so hard to predict who is going to be in what situation and where the order is going to shake out.
Yeah.
And we won't know what the order is going to look like until, FP1 in Bahrain.
Yeah.
When everybody's running similar fuel loads, everybody's running everything.
Start tuning up the engines as well. And
just a couple last minute notes from winter testing it seems like cautiously positive reviews on the car's ability to follow, which is and race each other, which has been the main target for Formula One and these new regulations.
Yeah.
They say that, Charles and George and a couple of other drivers have been positive in their response to the cars being able to follow. One thing that they have noticed, though, is that the slipstream is a little bit less effective. So it seems as though DRS is still going to be necessary, at least for the time being.
Yeah.
And I think that also is visible when you take a look at, images. They did a wet test one session where they completely drenched the track to test the intermediate tires and wet tires. And you could see the spray coming off the cars. And actually, if you check out our Twitter page, I did a comparison between the 2021 Belgian Grand Prix qualifying. I think it was Max Verstappen's lap compared to the spray off of the McLaren at the hands of Daniel Ricciardo, I believe. The spray off of the 2021 or 2022 cars is a lot higher than the spray coming off of the 2021 cars. And that's exactly what you're looking for when, there's less disturbance right behind the car. And so cars are able to follow each other a little bit more.
Yeah.
So it seems like Formula One is targeting that. They've had also some so far good reviews of the new low profile tires. They can take a little bit more beating. They're a little less sensitive to temperature.
Especially than originally anticipated too, because that was one of the big worries.
They still think that it's hard to get a handle on it just because, the drivers aren't used to it. They're heavier because of the larger rim sizes and everything. So it's a lot to get used to, but a lot of positive things moving forward ahead into the season. So we'll be releasing lots of content between now and the next test, and we will be sure to follow us on all of our social medias. We're now on Twitter.
Yes,
like and subscribe. Follow us along on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and Spotify.
Yep.
The @ is right down there below. It's the same for all of our socials. So be sure to give us a follow. And this will be up on YouTube shortly.
Yeah.
So now for us, we have a full day of motorsport to catch up on. IndyCar in St. Petersburg, Florida.
Yep.
And NASCAR in Fontana, California.
Yeah. Got a lot of racing to take a look at today. But this was cool being together.
Finally
together in the same room.
Actually in the same room.
Yeah, we should do this again sometime.
Yes. It's way more fun.
It is a lot more fun. And also when you have a cat curled up in your lap too.
Yeah, that's nice.
That is nice.
We love you, Enzo. He's asleep.
He's asleep under the table that our laptop is currently on. So, well, that is all for this episode. Be sure to like and subscribe, and
we'll see you next time.
We'll catch you next time. Peace out, everyone.